Bring your plate back.
There's a couple sure things I know. Well, good. A few more than a couple, I hope. But two of them are death and taxes. You've heard that before. Nothing is sure in life except for death and taxes, right? You probably know that God's love is a sure thing. I mean, you know, you're here, so I'm pretty sure you believe that, or at least you're open to the consideration that that's probably true. The other thing that is probably always going to be true is that the Blazers will never again win a national championship, ever. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. I tried for years to support them. Many tears were cried during that time. Anyway, neither will the Seahawks, even though I'm partial to them too. Okay, so there's a few things that are very sure in life, and one of them you might have witnessed yourself. You might have had this happen to you. You might have actually, if you're not a man, you may have experienced a man that you know being affected in this manner. Men share a bond, and it's not one, I'm not talking about, of course, like friendships or anything like that. I mean, one day, I was sitting at the kitchen table, and all of a sudden I had the distinct, I don't know how I could possibly describe it to you, someone in the neighborhood, approximately 1.25 miles away from me, was using power tools. I knew it. I couldn't tell you why I knew it. I just went, I stopped eating breakfast, and I put down my fork, and I went, someone's using power tools. Someone's building something. And I walked to the door, and I opened the door, and sure enough, I could hear it. Someone was using a saw somewhere. Someone was using a saw. And I immediately had this just urge to go and talk to him. I don't know why. But you probably experienced this before. Men are drawn to each other when we're building things or fixing things, which there's, men always decide to get the thing, right, that needs the most fixing. Yesterday, we went to, Carrie Ann and I and Jack went to Aurora Colony Days. And I'd never been to Aurora Colony Days before. I don't know why. We live in Canby, but I've never been. And, 30 years later, here we are. And there's a car show. There was a car show. If you wanted to see a bunch of men talking about stuff that always breaks as if it's the greatest thing in the world, a car show is where you need to be, especially antique cars. All these men are standing around going like, what kind of this are you using? What kind of tires you got on? And they're all talking in that kind of monotone voice, just asking each other questions, and then lamenting about the thing that will break. And ladies, I know this doesn't make sense, but it's not that we want to buy things that break just to satisfy our need to fix things. I mean, sometimes it is. But we also want to show you that even though we could buy a new car that doesn't break, gets great gas mileage, and has things like, safety features and airbags, we don't need to because we know how to fix things. And that's what it means to own a classic car. And these men were standing around each other, of course, talking about all the things that possibly could have broken on their cars. I saw smiles on their faces. And I saw these guys just really, really enjoying each other's company, talking about things that always break. But as a man, I've experienced this myself. I was, after Jack was born, maybe it's the ADHD. If you haven't met me before, you might notice that I have ADHD. I was sitting in the kitchen, and I needed to do something. And we had just bought this Jeep. Of course, I didn't buy a new Jeep. Why would you buy a new Jeep? I bought an old Jeep. And the brakes on it were... they stopped. I mean, they stopped, but, you had to anticipate stopping. This is what I tell myself. Eventually, it got to the point where I went, anticipating stopping probably doesn't work when something like jumps out in front of your car, and you need to like that. Because whenever the Jeep would go, and I would stop, eventually I would stop. So I went, I need to do brakes today. So I went outside. Whenever you do brakes, it takes about, 4.5 hours by yourself. Usually it's sunny, hot, or it's raining and cold. There's no in between when you're doing brakes. And you're out there, and you're bent over in this bent over position like that, and eventually it just becomes the way that you are, Eventually my neighbor Jared comes out. I don't know why he came outside. I couldn't tell you why he came outside. I think he knew that I was using tools. And he came outside and he's like, doing brakes. kind of brakes you using? Where'd you buy those? How much it cost? You doing all brakes today? What kind of, are you flushing fluid? What kind of fluid are you using? And we got into this conversation. All we talked about was brakes, and it was an amazing conversation. I can't tell you. When I first met my friend Scott that I work with, he works in the room right next to mine, and how we met is kind of interesting. He didn't come at first, we didn't come and talk to each other. As a man, you don't want to do that when you meet another man, like, that you don't know and stuff, because it goes back to, Knights of the Round Table and stuff. He could be an enemy. You never know. And so I was doing this thing that you do with the desks at our school. All the bolts in our desks at our school, kids sit down, and if you've ever seen a middle schooler sit down, they bang the desk and that kind of stuff when they sit. They never sit down like, they never do that. It's you boom, and they kind of like shake it a little bit. The bolts will come off those weekly. And occasionally it's really funny because it'll collapse on a kid as they're trying to do something, but occasionally that's also really dangerous because collapsing on kids is not a good thing, especially if it's like large pieces of machinery. Anyway, so I'm in there and I'm using a drill to tighten the bolts on the desk because it's a lot of bolts. I'm not going to use a screwdriver. It's crazy. And next thing I know, Scott is in my doorway. You using a drill? What are you using a drill for? What are you doing? Are you building something? Like, that was the actual conversation, and I went like, "Hey, I'm Geoff," and he was like, "I'm Scott. What kind of drill is that?" This is our friendship, right? And later that day, I also met my another friend of mine now, Dave, who works down the hallway. Right? I was screwing something into a wall, and he heard me doing that, and "I'm Dave. Using a drill." It's great. Men just do that. I mean, if you ever been, I could keep going, but I've been driving down, Carrie Ann experienced this the other day. We were driving through Canby. I saw a guy putting in a fence. I immediately wanted to stop. I was like, "What kind of fence is he putting in? What kind of board is he using?" And I started just looking around. Is that our car? Oh, sorry. I started looking around to see if the guy was there, to see if it would be okay to, go over to him and go like, "Hey, you putting in a fence? You putting in a fence? Who's putting in the fence, right?" And I wanted to do that. Anyway, if there's ever an accident that happens and you are in town, you're in like a group or an area where there's a large presence of men, we're kind of like our own guardianship. We'll be there like that, right? It's a great thing. I started thinking this week, what if there was another way to accomplish this, right? What if a fellow man wasn't there when I needed help? And I thought, what if there was like a network of, beings that do this kind of thing, right? There is. You probably already thought of angels, didn't you? Probably already did. If you didn't, well, I'm sorry. Probably didn't lead you there well enough. But today we're talking about angels. And we're talking about angels, not topically, but in a specific part of the Bible known as Hebrews. So if you got a Bible today, you can turn it to Hebrews. I would tell you the page number in my Bible, but that wouldn't help you at all. It's just Hebrews. Start turning toward Revelation, but don't get all the way to Revelation because, you got to back up from that. If you get all the way to Revelation, you got to first, flick some pages back so you don't get caught up. Start reading that and you go, "Ooh, that's good. That's good stuff." We're going to do a study on Revelation at some point. I promise. I'm getting there. It's got a lot of study in there. Crazy stuff. Anyway. Hebrews. Hebrews was written for a specific purpose. And you're probably sitting there going, "Yeah, Geoff, I know. The entire Bible was written for a specific purpose." Yes, but this was written specifically because the Christians were having a problem around 60-65 AD. We don't know if Paul was dead or not at this point. Some people have said, "Hey, Paul wrote Hebrews." Paul, though, has a specific style of writing. Paul always mentions himself at the beginning of the letter so that you know who is talking. He always kind of mentions what's going on with him because he's always writing to a church, right? This doesn't have that. So scholars have kind of gone, Paul probably didn't write this thing. So who did? We don't know is the answer. What we do know is that this was probably someone with a Greek origin. Because, first of all, it was originally written in Greek, and then second of all, just with the things that they mention as they're going through it, and we'll get there, we'll get there, I'm just kind of giving some background on this. What was happening right at this point during the time of the church was persecution. And you're probably, again, thinking, that's normal, Jeff. Well, yes. This was very specific, though. It had been quite a while since Jesus had died. Now, it'd be around AD 60 to 65. So around 55 to 60 years since Jesus had died and rose from the dead. This Christian movement has since taken off, since become its own thing. Paul's letters have been written. Paul has pretty much accomplished his ministry. And so you have all that groundwork laid, that nice groundwork. And the problem is that in Rome, Christians are still not the most popular. You've been through the reign of Nero the tyrant, who has, during Paul's ministry, who actually reigned and actually went after Christians by name. Actually, everything that was wrong with the things that Nero was doing as an emperor, when someone would call him out and say, "Hey, Nero, why is our empire falling apart?" He'd go, "It's the Christians. We need to kill more of them." And he would go after them and use that. But that still really hasn't gone away because, as you might know, things take a long time to die. And that sentiment against Christians was still taking a long time to die. Meanwhile, the Jewish leaders, no one was after them. And so they were coming to the Christians and they were saying things like, "Is it really true that Jesus rose from the dead? How do you know? You didn't see him. No one saw him except for this little small group, and they don't know anything. Come on. I mean, what did Paul really mean?" And they were doing that kind of thing. They were also, we kind of learned in chapter 1, they were also talking to the Christians, trying to get them to abandon their previous conceptions on things like angels. So I'll lay the groundwork for angels first, because they were suggesting a very dangerous thing about angels. First of all, we kind of ask ourselves, what are angels? In fact, I did when I did this. The purpose of angels in the Bible is kind of convoluted. You have to go through the entire thing to kind of pick and choose and kind of look through some chapters and passages where angels are mentioned. The first thing that angels do is that they are messengers of both good and bad stuff. A lot of good stuff, actually. We also know that they are scary looking as all get out. For an example, I go to Luke 1, 26 to 38. When an angel comes to Mary, Mary is, of course, for some reason not frightened, but then Joseph is incredibly frightened. In verse 26, it says, "In the 6th month of pregnancy, in Elizabeth's pregnancy, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a town in Galilee, to a virgin pledged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of David. The virgin's name was Mary. The angel came to her and said, 'Greetings, you are highly favored. The Lord is with you.'" And then right after that, it actually says that Mary was quite troubled by this. And we don't know if Mary was quite troubled by the fact that there was a glowing person in front of her, or the fact that they were speaking about the things they were speaking about. I would imagine, though, since Joseph had a similar reaction, that it's one of those things that it just revolves around angels looking incredibly crazy, awesome, and just scary as all get out. Because when the same angel comes to Joseph, they have to go, "Oh, hold on, don't wet yourself. It's fine, it's okay," and they have to calm Joseph down, right? So we have angels as messengers, and we also have angels as fierce warrior apocalyptic beings that bring good news, but also look like fierce warrior apocalyptic beings. In Revelation, angels are being referenced as waging an intergalactic war in Revelation 12:7. It says, "Then a war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back." Now, step back from that for a second. Just picture that. A war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. This is something from your wildest nightmares coming true. This legion, I imagine a legion of angels and a legion of demons and this dragon just waging an intergalactic struggle at the end of the world. And that is something that would be just incredible to see and downright scary. Angels are all of those things. So as people that have encountered angels before, and I believe that since the Holy Spirit that lives within us, that resides within us, resides within you and me, can do incredible signs and wonders that the Bible says that it did, I don't believe that Spirit has changed at all. I don't believe our God has changed at all, right? From the Bible, God is the same from the beginning to the end. Jesus, his Son, is the same from the beginning to the end, and there is no end because they created time. They are interdimensional beings who see the entire timeline of history, and not only that, but they hold it in their hand. If you and I believe that about Jesus and about his Father, God, and about the Holy Spirit, then the things they created, like angels, still serve the same purpose here today. I don't think anything has changed, folks. And so, if I'm considering that, and some of you probably already have stories where you've encountered something fishy, and we'll get there, you probably think to yourself, wouldn't it behoove us, I guess, to step back from angels and know exactly what they are so that we don't get into a habit of potentially worshiping them? The Christians in this time in Hebrews were actually being convinced by the Jewish leaders, hey, you can come back, but here's this new thing we're doing. We're worshiping angels. We're worshiping them. Because they are fearsome apocalyptic beings. We understand that. We recognize that. They're really powerful. We want to deify angels. And that is a problem. God said, you will have no other gods before me. You'll have no other idols before me. In fact, Paul, when he was going through Rome, he saw many different gods, right? And he kind of walked past all of them and said, here's an unnamed God I want to tell you about. And he is the only God. All these other gods are a lie and are just made of clay. And angels, well, angels have a specific purpose, are not to be worshipped. So we'll go there. This is quite a long passage, so I'll start it, starting in chapter 1 of Hebrews. In the past, God spoke to our ancestors through the prophets at many times and in various ways. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, and through whom also he made the universe. The Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word. After he had provided purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty, capital majesty, in heaven. So he became as much superior to the angels as the name he has inherited is superior to theirs. So that kind of sets the stage. That's Jesus. That's who Jesus is. In verse 5. For to which of the angels did God ever say, you are my son, today I have become your father? It'd be kind of crazy for God to say that to an angel, wouldn't it? That's kind of crazy talk. He keeps going. Or again, I will be his father, and you will be my son. And again, when God brings his firstborn into the world, he says, let all God's angels worship him. And speaking of the angels, he says, he makes his angels spirits, and his servants flames of fire. But about the Son, he said, your throne, O God, will last forever and ever. A scepter of justice will be the scepter of your kingdom. You have loved righteousness and hated wickedness. Therefore, God, your God, has set you above your companions by anointing you with the oil of joy. He also said, in the beginning, Lord, you laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. They will perish, but you will remain. They will all wear out like a garment. You will roll them up like a robe. Like a garment, they will be changed. But you remain the same, and your years will never end. To which of the angels did God ever say, sit at my hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet? I'm going to stop there because the next part is really cool. But going back to that last part, he says, to which of the angels did God ever say, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet? Angels, while fearsome apocalyptic beings, messengers, made to serve us here on earth, there's a few things we need to understand about them if we are to understand God. Because angels are a lot like us, but yet are on just different levels. We know that because of reading that, first of all, angels are not to be worshipped. I think we can all kind of agree with that. This was something, though, in the early church that was kind of a new teaching. No one had ever really addressed that straight on, except, when Jesus was talking about himself, going, you will have, I am the one, I am God in the flesh. I'm the God that was prophesied about in Isaiah, and I've come back. And that kind of should have stopped everything, right? That should have gone, you shouldn't have any other gods before him. But it needed to be said that angels were subservient to not only God, but also kind of servants of us. The second thing it talks about is it's kind of a call, isn't it? This last chapter, this chapter we just read, is kind of a call. Why would you return to the way things were, and why would you go back to the Jews and to the way that basically worshiping the law too, when we also know that God or Jesus has come and redeemed. Redemption is free. The law is you doing stuff. Why would you go back? That doesn't make any sense. The author almost kind of gets angry. I kind of like that in the first chapter. If you kind of read that over and over again, I've been living with this first chapter all week. To me now, it sounds almost angry. It sounds angry to the Christians that were trying to set up, we're kind of becoming wishy-washy and kind of trying to set up new things for themselves. The author is almost saying, do you really want to go back? Look at how mighty and powerful your God is right now. Nothing is before him. Everything cowers before him. And you want to go back to the way things were? You want to go back to worshiping the law and hoping that's going to solve everything? It's not. What are you doing? It's almost vindictive toward these Christians, and I think they kind of needed to be scolded at this point. We also know that the characteristics of an angel is that, first of all, like we said before, they're kind of downright scary looking. In various places in the Bible, you kind of have to, if you're an angel and you show up to places, you kind of have to say, "Whoa, don't be afraid. Whoa, hold on." Kind of like when Jesus comes out of the tomb and there's two glowing men right there, they kind of have to announce themselves and then go, "Oh, hold on. It's all good. It's fine." If you're an angel and you show up someplace, you really have to calm people down. We also know that they have free will. We know this because there are two sides. There are angels, and there are their counterpart, which are demons, creatures that have been created by God. Angels all have free will. I would imagine God could send out Gabriel and say, "Hey, I need you as my servant to go and tell Mary the good news." Gabriel could have probably said, "No, not going to do that," and probably could have gone his own way. Not something you want to do in the face of a holy God who created you, though. So he made the correct decision. There's a lot of angels that did not make the correct decision, so we know that. Angels have free will, just like us. We also know, because of verse 14 in Hebrews 1, that they are God's special agents. It says in verse 14, "Are not all angels ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation?" I'll read that again. "Are not all angels ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation?" Interesting. Later in Hebrews, it actually talks about this, and because we're talking about angels today, I figured I would skip ahead in the story. I know you're not supposed to do that. It's kind of like one of those choose your own adventure books when you go ahead and if you want a good ending, go to page 1/3. No one knows those books. I love those books. Those are great books. This is a choose your own adventure. So in 13:2 it says this: "Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers." You probably have heard this. "For by doing so, many people have entertained angels without being aware of it." In the 90s, the band Newsboys came out with a song called "Entertaining Angels," and I think the album named the same thing, Matt? Is that same thing? It was called "Entertaining Angels," and the song goes, "Entertaining angels by the light of my TV screen," and it talks about a character who invites angels into his home. It was a really cool song, and it kind of reminds you that whoever you are witnessing to, and whoever you're taking care of, whether you're bringing them food or showing them kindness or praying for them in any way, they might be someone who is allowing you to fulfill your ministry with God. They might actually be in. Yes?
Step up to the microphone.
Step up to the microphone. Thank you. If you want to go look that up. Awesome album, by the way.
They're going to be at the state fair.
This is a good shameless plug. I like it. I hope they play. They don't play a lot of throwback songs now, do they?
29. No.
29. I love that song. I think I own that album somewhere. Yeah, anyway, it's such a great album, but it's also, it talks about this man's ministry as he invites someone into his house, and he doesn't realize he's entertaining an angel. It's really cool. Angels allow us to kind of accomplish that. Imagine, though, if you get to eternity, right? And there is a passage that actually says, what if you got to eternity, right? And Jesus says, he says, hey, so I, meaning an angel, I was a traveler, and you need to invite me in. You know the passage I'm talking about? And it kind of goes along, and the person says, well, I didn't see you. When have I ever seen you like that? And it's, the passage, of course, goes, that which you have done for the least of these, you have done for me. That also could refer to angels in this case, because in 13:2 it says, do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so many have entertained angels without even being aware of it. So they could be amongst our midst right now, and we would not even know it. The other thing that happens is that at different times, different people in the Bible, especially prophets, have actually asked God to show them the battle raging around them, because they're kind of not sure, right? They're kind of like, I'm not sure what's happening. I'm not sure if God's actually doing anything. Lord, would you show me what's going on? And God opens their eyes and shows them a multitude of angels armied and camped around them. Angels are really stinking cool. I'm sorry for saying the word cool, but they are. But you shouldn't worship them. You should always welcome becoming a servant to somebody else, because you never know if they are an angel. And then thirdly, I believe that because they are ministering beings just like us, God does not need them. Let me stop right there, because I probably offended somebody. God does not need angels. God does not need you or I. If you or I decided, God, you told me to go to this place. I'm not going to fulfill that ministry, though. I would like to do my own thing. That's uncomfortable for me. God is still going to accomplish what He is going to accomplish. Amen? He is an all-powerful God. He does all-powerful things. And He has a lot of people that could accomplish the same thing as you or I could. But the difference is, if He asks you to do something, if He commands me, hey Jeff, you need to go talk to the guy down the road because he is about to make a bad decision. And if I don't go, and this has happened to me before, God will put something in there, and I'll go, I don't know, God, that kind of makes me uncomfortable. I don't know that person really. God will still accomplish that task, but that was my task to accomplish. God knew that my specific skill set and the things in my head that day were important for that person right there. God will still accomplish that task if He wants to. He just wanted to do it through me, right? The same is true for the angel Gabriel. Again, if he went to Joseph, or he went to the angel Gabriel and said, hey, you need to go to Joseph and tell him the good news, he's about to have a son. And if Gabriel came to God and said, I don't know, that kind of makes me uncomfortable. I'm going to have to explain about the thing we're not married yet. That's a really uncomfortable topic. I'm going to have to pass right here. Can you put me, in Revelation where we're fighting dragons? That's really cool. I want to do that. You could have said that to God, right? And God could have gone, okay, I'll send somebody else. But that was Gabriel's task. He knew that Gabriel had the right skill set to do that. God will always put you in the right spot at the right time if He asks Him to. The same is true for angels, right? I want to close with a story here. Be on the lookout for angels, because they actually help your ministry in ways that you didn't even know was possible. My grandma struggled with, not the one that you've seen come here, I had a Grandma Delva, and she lived in Central Oregon. She fought cancer, lymphoma, for about 15 years. The first year of the cancer, she goes to the doctor. The doctor says, your body is infested with cancer. Get your affairs in order, you're going to die. That's true, that's what happened. She said, she prayed about it a while. She actually came home and didn't tell anyone this, and we only found this out later. She actually decided to go get a second opinion. So she went to a specialist who also was in Redmond at the time. And the specialist said, yes, normally I would say the same thing, however. And he actually had a list of treatments that she could undergo. So she kept taking those avenues, right? She would pray for discernment. God would give her another way. This woman was a woman of God, and she was someone who God was going to use. She was going to be used with the cancer. In fact, because of the cancer, she would witness to people about her relationship with God. Such an amazing thing. But God even plugged that into a 100-watt amplifier. God not only said, I'm going to use you with your cancer and use that story to impact people for me, but I'm going to use an angel to do that too. One day, she was on the way to the hospital to go get treatment. And she was so weak. She had been undergoing both radiation and chemical treatment. Oh no. Chemo. She was undergoing both radiation and chemo, and it had been a long time. She was really tired, and she about fell asleep in the car on the way to the hospital before all of a sudden she heard a violent, destructive-sounding pop. She had blown a tire. She ran over a nail or something. She had blown a tire completely. She pulled off the side of Highway 97 just outside Bend, and she actually got out of the car. It was about 97 degrees outside. I remember we were home at the ranch that they owned on Highway 97. And this little old lady decides to get the jack and decides to fix the car. This was not going to happen because, of course, she was extremely tired from chemo. Her white blood cell count was just in the toilet. She was not doing well. Her color looked terrible when she got home. I can attest that lady should not have been doing what she was doing, but how else was she going to get to the hospital? She didn't have a cell phone. She just didn't have anyone to call. And she said that all of a sudden there was a man directly behind her, just standing there. She doesn't know where he came from. There was no car on the road. There was no farm anywhere near that. You would have to go down the road a ways to find anybody. There was a man somehow standing right behind her. Not only that, but this man had a suit on. He had a suit on in 97-degree heat on Highway 97 approaching Bend. Does this sound like a normal situation to you? Yeah. So this man says, get back in the car. I'm going to fix your tire. And my grandma distinctly remembers asking to pay him. He said, nope, I will take no money. I know you need to get to your cancer treatment. Get back in the car. I'm going to fix your tire. My grandma later recalled that the jack remained in the trunk. The man didn't ask where it was, and he made no move to retrieve the jack. This is super crazy, isn't it? He goes to the side where the tire is. He found the spare, which is right under the trunk. He got that down. He then somehow changed the tire without jacking up the car. Right? You following me? He then puts on the tire, he puts the spare back, and he asks her to roll down the window. She rolls down the window. She again offers him money. The man wouldn't take any money. She says, thank you. The man said, hey, just tell people what happened. Have a nice day. That's all he said. And then he starts to walk the other way. My grandma leans out of the car, I guess, and screams after him and asks him his name. And she says, what's your name? I need to know your name. I need to know your name. His name was Christian. Now, of course, that's not a name of a... when we were hearing this around the dinner table, we were going like, it would have been really cool if he said Mordecai or something like that. That would have been really interesting if he had said that. But no, he said Christian, which, you know, there's no angel that I know in the Bible that's named Christian, but it's a very Christian name, isn't it? Yeah, but that honestly became part of her narrative. And because that angelic encounter became part of her narrative, she actually got a lot of other people to believe in her God before she finally succumbed to the cancer 15 years later. And in fact, in 5-year increments in that time, a doctor would continually come to her and say, well, that's it, you're done. She would then go to prayer. God would provide a way. There would be another treatment. She would live another 5 years. It almost happened like clockwork every 5 years. And we didn't understand it except for the fact that God had left her on earth to carry that story with her. And that angel became part of her story. So if an angel is part of your story today, I have another challenge for you. Share that story this week. A lot of us have an angel as part of our story, especially if you've been around a while. You probably experienced something like that if you've been walking with God for a while. I'd share that this week. make that part of your story. Let's pray. God, I thank you for your servants in heavenly places and here, that we all have a job to do, and I thank you that the angels that we hear about in the Bible said yes. They said yes to helping us here on earth. They said yes to advancing your kingdom, and God, we can say yes to doing the same thing with using them. I thank you for their ministry, and I ask you to bless all of them as they go about helping us throughout our week. I believe that they're everywhere, and I thank you for having our ministries being entwined like this. Amen.
Good stuff.